The sun beat down on the asphalt of Springfield that Thursday morning. Miss Eleanor Smith adjusted her simple cotton dress and took a deep breath before pushing open the revolving door of the Horizon Bank branch, located in the downtown area of the Midlands capital. In her worn fabric purse, she carefully guarded a check for $820,000 bond, the result of years of hard work and an investment that had finally paid off. At 55 years old, Eleanor did not let the heat get to her, nor the deep dark circles that marked her face. They were scars from sleepless nights, from worries about bills, from silent battles that few would comprehend. Her grey hair, tied in a discreet bun, and her calloused hands told stories she rarely shared. The branch was busy. Executives in impeccable suits, ladies with gleaming jewelry, and young professionals formed lines at the ATMs and waited for service. Eleanor headed to the counter, where a young teller named Julia greeted her with a polite smile. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you?" "Good morning, my dear. I need to deposit this check, please." Eleanor took the envelope from her purse and handed the check to the teller, who couldn't hide her surprise at seeing the amount. "One moment, please. I'll call the manager for authorization." Julia stood up and walked to a glass-walled office, where Sterling Maxwell, the branch manager, was frantically typing on his computer. A 42-year-old man with meticulously combed hair and a tailored suit, Sterling was known for his obsession with targets and for his differentiated treatment according to the client's profile. "Mr. Maxwell, there's a lady at the counter wanting to deposit a high-value check. I need your authorization." The manager looked up from his screen, annoyed by the interruption. "Who is the client?" "Ms. Eleanor Smith. She's not from the premium segment." Sterling sighed, visibly displeased, and followed Julia to the counter. Upon seeing Eleanor in her simple clothes and tired appearance, something in his gaze changed. The practiced smile he usually offered to important clients was replaced by an expression of disdain. "Good morning, ma'am. Is there a problem with this check?" "No problem at all, sir. It's payment for my share in a real estate venture. I'm a minority partner in the Newville Residences, the one that sold all units in 7 months. The manager took the check, examining it suspiciously. The amount of $820,000 seemed incompatible with the woman in front of him. Eleanor remained serene, accustomed to judgmental looks. "Are you sure this check is authentic, ma'am?" Sterling's voice grew louder, attracting the attention of other clients. "We have strict procedures against fraud. Of course it's authentic, sir. Why wouldn't it be?" Eleanor maintained her dignity, despite the humiliation she was beginning to feel. "Look, ma'am." Sterling's tone rose even further. "Checks of values like this are not common for people of your profile." Silence fell over the branch. All eyes turned to the scene. Julia lowered her gaze, embarrassed by her boss's behavior. A client in the next line discreetly began filming the situation with her cell phone. "What are you implying?" Eleanor asked, her voice firm but serene. "I'm implying that we need to verify the origin of this money. I can't simply accept a check of this value from just anyone who walks through the door." "Just anyone?" Eleanor repeated, feeling the weight of those words. It was then that Sterling, overcome by a mix of prejudice and pressure for results, did something unthinkable. With a sudden movement, he tore the check into several pieces. "This is clearly an attempt at fraud. I suggest you not return to this branch, or I'll have to call security." The fragments of the check fell onto the counter and the floor. Eleanor felt as if each piece was a shard in her chest, but she did not allow herself to show it. Julia, horrified, knelt to pick up the pieces, placing them in an envelope. "I'm so sorry, Miss Eleanor," she whispered, handing the envelope to the lady. Eleanor accepted the envelope with dignity. She didn't make a scene, didn't raise her voice. She simply looked into Sterling's eyes and said, with a calm that only the strong possess, "You will regret this, not because of who I am, but because of what you have done." She left the branch with her head held high, under curious glances and some whispers of indignation. The warm air of Springfield welcomed her again, but something had changed. She was no longer just Eleanor, the simple woman who had entered the bank. She was Eleanor Smith, determined to show that respect is not a privilege but a right. In her simple home in the Maplewood neighborhood, Eleanor placed the envelope with the pieces of the check on the kitchen table. Despite the modesty of the property, everything was impeccably clean and organized. On the walls, photos of her only daughter, Marianne, from childhood to university graduation. She sat down, took a deep breath, and picked up the phone. She dialed a number she rarely used. "Dr. Thompson, it's Eleanor Smith. We need to talk about Horizon Bank." "Tomorrow at your office?" "Perfect. And, doctor, please bring that folder about the debentures we bought 2 years ago." "Yes, those very ones." She hung up the phone and looked at a photograph on the wall, she and Marianne embracing, smiling. Beside it, a framed newspaper clipping with the headline, "Former Cleaner Builds Business Empire, Inspires Midlands Community." Eleanor smiled. Manager Sterling had no idea who he had just humiliated. The dawn in Springfield brought with it the scent of Midlands coffee that Eleanor prepared in her old coffee maker. As she watched the first lights of day color the sky through the window, her mind traveled through time, recalling every obstacle she had overcome to get there. Born in the small town of Silverton, in the heart of the Midlands, Eleanor was the daughter of farm laborers who barely managed to put food on the table. At 14, when her parents suffered a tragic accident on the road connecting the town to the capital, she found herself alone in the world. With nowhere to go, she moved to Springfield, where she began working as a domestic helper in the homes of wealthy families in the Oakwood Heights neighborhood. At 16, a brief relationship resulted in an unexpected pregnancy. The child's father disappeared as soon as he heard the news. Alone again, Eleanor promised herself that her daughter would have every opportunity she never had. Marianne was born on a rainy April day, and with her came an even greater determination. "Good morning, Mum." Marianne, now a 39-year-old woman with a degree in economics from the State University of the Midlands, entered the kitchen. "Already making your strong coffee?" "The usual, honey. It's what keeps me going all these years." Eleanor smiled, pouring a cup for her daughter. "I called Dr. Thompson yesterday." Marianne raised her eyebrows, surprised. "The lawyer? What happened?" Eleanor sighed, recounting the humiliating episode at the bank branch. As she told of the manager's attitude, Marianne's expression alternated between indignation and determination. "Mom, this is unacceptable. We have to sue this bank, this manager." "Calm down, honey. That's not how I solve things. Remember what I always taught you? The best response isn't to shout louder, but to act intelligently." Eleanor poured more coffee, while her daughter watched her with admiration. This was the woman who, despite all the difficulties, never stopped prioritizing her education. Who woke up at 4 a.m. to work as a cleaner in downtown offices, rushed back to prepare lunch, and still worked late into the night cleaning residences. "How could I forget?" Marianne smiled. "You taught me that dignity is priceless." Eleanor's smile widened as she remembered the turning point in her life. After years of working for others, with shifts that sometimes reached 16 hours a day, she saw an opportunity. Many of her employers commented on the difficulty of finding reliable cleaning services for their businesses. With her rigorously saved earnings, Eleanor never spent a cent more than necessary. She founded Clean and Respect Services initially, just herself and 2 acquaintances from the neighborhood. The difference? Impeccable punctuality, absolute honesty, and meticulous work that left every environment spotless. "Remember our first office?" Eleanor asked nostalgically. "How could I forget?" A small room in the back of Ms. Rose's house, with a landline phone and that covered agenda you carried everywhere. The small room had transformed into a rented office, and then into its own headquarters. Small contracts with law firms and medical clinics evolved into city halls, hospitals, and finally, large construction companies. Clean and Respect Services became synonymous with excellence in the Midlands. "And to think that today we have over 400 employees," Eleanor commented with a sparkle of pride in her eyes. "Each with a formal employment contract, benefits, health insurance. Just as I always wanted it to be." What few knew was that Eleanor, with monastic discipline, reinvested every penny she earned. She created a holding company and began financing small businesses in the neighborhood. Mr. Anthony's Bakery, the Sullivan Brothers Auto Repair Shop, Ms. Hilda's Uniform Factory. In each venture, she became a strategic partner, offering not only capital but mentorship based on her vast practical experience. 17 companies, Mom. 17 businesses that today employ over 1,000 people in this city. Marianne seemed to be mentally inventorying the discreet empire her mother had built. And that manager thought you were trying to pull a scam. Eleanor shrugged. It's not the first time I've been judged by my appearance, nor will it be the last. But this time it will be different. Marianne knew exactly what her mother meant. Eleanor never flaunted wealth. She continued to live in the same middle-class house where she raised her daughter, dressed simply, and drove a 5-year-old economy car. Her only extravagance was ensuring Marianne had the best possible education, first in excellent private schools, then with exchange programs in the United States and Europe. What are you going to do, Mom? I know that look. Eleanor walked to a small office next to the living room where she kept an organized desk with meticulously labeled folders. She opened a drawer and pulled out a red folder with the Horizon Bank logo. Remember when that bank faced a liquidity crisis 2 years ago? When their shares plummeted and they had to issue debentures to avoid closing their doors? Marianne nodded, beginning to understand what her mother was getting at. At the time, many traditional investors were wary, but I saw potential there. Eleanor opened the folder, revealing documents of a substantial investment. I invested $2,400,000 in those debentures. According to the latest report, this makes me the largest individual creditor, holding 17% of the bank's private debt. Marianne's eyes widened. And that means, it means I have a voice. It means that in cases of proven institutional misconduct, I can request an extraordinary meeting with the board of directors. Eleanor closed the folder with determination. And that's exactly what I'll do today with Dr. Thompson. That afternoon, in the luxurious office of Theodore Thompson, one of Springfield's most respected lawyers, Eleanor calmly explained her strategy. The lawyer, who had managed his clients' contracts and investments for years, listened with attention and growing admiration. Ms. Eleanor, you never cease to surprise me. Always 3 steps ahead. I learned the hard way, Doctor. In this world, those who don't prepare end up getting run over. The plan was set. It wasn't about revenge, but about correction. It wasn't about humiliating those who had humiliated her, but transforming a painful experience into an opportunity for systemic change. As she had always done in her life, Eleanor would turn adversity into advancement. As she left the office, she received a message from Julia, the teller who had witnessed everything at the bank and collected the pieces of the check. Somehow the young woman had gotten her contact information. Miss Eleanor, I'm sorry for what happened yesterday. I wanted you to know that it wasn't the first time Mr. Maxwell has acted this way. Many clients have suffered the same treatment, but no one has had the courage to do anything about it. If you need any information, I'm at your disposal. Eleanor smiled. An unexpected ally, she replied, thanking her, and arranging to meet for coffee the next day. The imposing Horizon Bank building stood like a monolith of glass and steel in Springfield's financial heart. The morning after the incident, Eleanor, dressed in a simple but elegant pantsuit, a rare concession to her usual discretion, walked through the mirrored corridors of the 18th floor, where the boardroom was located. Beside her, Dr. Theodore Thompson carried a brown leather briefcase containing all the necessary documents. Remember, Ms. Eleanor, you have every right to be here. Don't be intimidated. Eleanor smiled serenely. Doctor, I've spent my entire life being underestimated. That's where my strength lies. The president's secretary, visibly surprised to see a simply dressed lady with an appointment on the bank's most sought-after agenda, led them to the boardroom. Inside, 3 people awaited. Jonathan Vance, president of Horizon Bank, a 60-year-old man with perfectly trimmed grey hair. Patricia Miller, director of operations, a 45-year-old black woman known for her relentless competence. And Gregory Peterson, legal director, a bald man with thin glasses who was flipping through documents with a worried expression. Good morning, everyone. Eleanor greeted them with the politeness that had always been her calling card, even in the most difficult times. Mrs. Smith, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. Jonathan stood up, extending his hand. I confess I was intrigued by the urgency of this meeting. Believe me, Mr. Vance, I would prefer not to be here today. Eleanor sat down, placing a transparent envelope containing the check fragments on the table. But certain situations demand direct action. For the next 20 minutes, Eleanor recounted with surgical precision every moment of the episode at the branch. Her voice did not tremble as she described the manager's look of contempt, nor as she repeated the words he had used to insinuate that she did not have the profile to carry a high-value check. She described how he had torn the document in front of employees and clients, and how she had left the bank without making a scene, choosing to act methodically rather than impulsively. A heavy silence fell over the room when she finished her account. Patricia Miller was the first to break it. "Mrs. Smith, on behalf of Horizon Bank, I apologize for the unacceptable treatment you received. I can assure you that we will take immediate action." "I appreciate your words, Ms. Miller, but I didn't come here just for apologies." Eleanor gestured to Dr. Thompson, who opened his briefcase and distributed copies of a contract. "As you may know, I hold 17% of the debentures issued by this institution during the crisis 2 years ago. According to Clause 23, this guarantees me the right to request corrective measures in cases of proven institutional misconduct." Gregory Peterson adjusted his glasses, analyzing the document with growing concern. "You are correct regarding your contractual rights. What exactly are you requesting?" "Before I answer, I would like Mr. Sterling Maxwell to be called into this room." A tense silence settled again. Jonathan exchanged glances with the other directors before nodding to the secretary, who quickly left to make the call. 15 minutes later, Sterling entered the room, his face pale as he recognized Eleanor sitting at the board table. "Mr. Maxwell, Miss Smith has reported a rather disturbing incident to us that occurred yesterday at your branch. I would like to hear your version of the facts." Jonathan's voice was controlled, but there was a note of severity that did not go unnoticed. Sterling swallowed hard, adjusting his tie. "Mr. President, there was indeed a situation with this client. We had suspicions of possible fraud due to the unusual value of the check and the atypical profile for our premium portfolio." "And what led you to tear up a valid banking document in the middle of the branch?" Patricia asked, her tone making it clear that no justification would be sufficient. "I may have acted impulsively. We were under pressure to reduce risks and—" "Gentlemen," Dr. Thompson interrupted, pulling more documents from his briefcase. "In addition to Ms. Smith's testimony, we have additional evidence. A client recorded the incident with her cell phone and kindly provided us with the video. Furthermore, teller Julia Santos provided a written statement confirming the facts." Jonathan raised his hand, signaling that he had seen enough. "Mr. Maxwell, is there any Horizon Bank policy that authorizes employees to destroy client documents or to make judgments based on appearance?" "No, Mr. President. And did you know who Ms. Smith was before this incident?" "No, sir." "Ms. Smith," Jonathan turned to Eleanor, "you mentioned that this would not be the first incident of its kind in our branches." Eleanor nodded, while Dr. Thompson distributed more documents. "In the last 48 hours, we have identified 3 other formal complaints against Mr. Maxwell for disrespectful treatment of clients considered, in his own words, outside the premium profile." Patricia Miller flipped through the documents with a somber expression. "This is systematic. It's not an isolated incident." A heavy silence fell upon the room. Sterling seemed to have shrunk in his chair, while the board exchanged meaningful glances. Finally, Jonathan spoke. "Mr. Maxwell, in view of this evidence, I am ordering your immediate suspension for 30 days without pay. During this period, you must complete a mandatory retraining program in ethics, customer service, and diversity. After this period, there will be a re-evaluation that will determine your continued employment or termination from this institution." Sterling opened his mouth to protest, but Jonathan's gaze silenced him. "This is not open for discussion, Mr. Maxwell. You may leave." After Sterling's departure, the atmosphere in the room changed. Patricia Miller sighed deeply before speaking. "Mrs. Smith, thank you for bringing this to our attention. I believe we are facing a deeper problem than just a problematic employee." "You are absolutely right," Eleanor replied calmly. "What I witnessed is a symptom of a culture that has become technical and cold, where numbers matter more than people." Jonathan nodded slowly. Our customer satisfaction ratings have fallen 18% in the last year. We've lost loyal clients to smaller banks. Perhaps it's time to rethink our approach. It was then that Patricia Miller did something unexpected. She stood up, walked over to Eleanor and asked, with genuine interest, "Mr. Smith, given your impressive track record of transforming businesses through the humanization of service, I would like to extend an invitation to you. We are forming a client advisory board with 12 members to directly influence our policies and practices, quarterly meetings, and active voice in strategic decisions. Would you accept to be a part of it?" Eleanor did not respond immediately. She looked at Dr. Thompson, who nodded discreetly, and then at the 3 directors. "I accept, with 3 conditions." "We're listening," Jonathan said, leaning forward. "First, mandatory training for all managers and coordinators, not just for Mr. Maxwell. A sick tree is not cured by treating only one branch." Patricia quickly took a note. "Agreed. Next." "Second, creation of an anonymous and independent complaints channel, operated by an external company, accessible to both clients and employees. Many voices are silenced by fear." "We will do that," Gregory confirmed. "And the third condition, allocation of part of the profit to a microcredit fund aimed exclusively at low-income entrepreneurs. I know very well how difficult it is to get that first opportunity when you come from humble beginnings." The 3 directors exchanged glances. After a brief moment, Jonathan extended his hand to Eleanor. "We have a deal, Mrs. Smith, and I have one more request. We would like Ms. Julia Santos to also join the board. We need voices from the front lines." Eleanor smiled, shaking the president's hand. "Excellent choice." She demonstrated integrity in a difficult moment. As she left the boardroom, Eleanor felt a sensation she hadn't experienced in a long time, that a door had been opened not only for her, but for many who would come after. In the elevator, Dr. Thompson couldn't contain a smile of admiration. "Ms. Eleanor, you came seeking justice for yourself and ended up achieving changes for thousands. Doctor, I've learned in life that true victory isn't in winning alone, but in paving the way. Now the real work begins." On the ground floor, passing by the branch where everything had begun, Eleanor noticed Julia attending a client. Their eyes met, and the young teller gave a discreet thumbs up. A silent alliance had formed, and Springfield would never be the same. 3 weeks had passed since the confrontation in the boardroom. Eleanor, sitting in the cozy Midlands Bloom Cafe, downtown Springfield, watched the city wake up as she waited for Julia. The young teller had become an important ally in that transformation process. "Sorry I'm late, Ms. Eleanor." Julia arrived in a hurry, adjusting her curly hair. "The team training ended up running long." "No problem, my dear." "How are things at the branch?" Julia smiled, her eyes shining with enthusiasm as she sat down. "You wouldn't believe the change. It's like a different place. Ever since Edward took over as interim manager, everything has changed." The coffee arrived, and Eleanor listened attentively as Julia described the initial transformations: daily training on humanized customer service, meetings to discuss difficult cases, the new policy of listen first, never judge. Small changes that combined were beginning to create a completely different environment. "And that list of clients you mentioned, the ones who experienced similar situations?" Eleanor asked, taking a sip of her coffee. Julia opened her purse and pulled out a small notebook. "I managed to identify 7 well-documented cases. People who left the branch humiliated in recent months. Most never came back after that." Eleanor studied the list carefully. Names, addresses, brief descriptions of the occurrences. Stories of pain and humiliation that could have been avoided with a little empathy. "I will visit each of them personally," Eleanor decided. "Some wounds only heal with a sincere apology." In the following weeks, Eleanor transformed into an unofficial ambassador for Horizon Bank. She visited each person on the list, listened to their stories, shared her own experience, and most importantly, showed that real changes were happening. Some, like Mr. Anthony, a retired shoemaker who had a loan humiliatingly denied, agreed to return to the institution after clear guarantees of respect. Meanwhile, the implementation of the anonymous complaints channel progressed rapidly. An independent company specializing in corporate ombudsman services was hired, and posters informing about the new service were spread throughout all branches. "Your voice matters" was the campaign slogan, accompanied by a phone number and a QR code that directed to a complaints application. In just 15 days, the channel received 43 reports, some complimentary, others denouncing questionable practices. Each case was carefully analyzed, resulting in frank conversations, course corrections, and in more serious situations, some necessary dismissals. The bank was purifying itself from the inside out. "The microcredit fund is ready to start operating," Patricia Miller announced during a meeting with Eleanor in her office. "We will start with $500,000 as agreed. We already have the selection criteria defined and a trained team to evaluate projects." "Excellent," Eleanor smiled, flipping through the folder with the program details. "I want to personally follow the first cases. I know how difficult it is to take that first step when no one believes in you." The first beneficiary of the fund was John Peter, a 24-year-old from the Northview Estates neighborhood, one of Springfield's most disadvantaged areas. A former Technical Institute mechanics student, he dreamed of opening his own workshop, but couldn't prove sufficient income for a traditional loan. With the approval of the new program, he received $30,000 and, more importantly, gained close mentorship from experienced entrepreneurs. "Miss Eleanor, you can't imagine what this means to me," John Peter said, emotional during the contract signing. "My father spent his entire life working for others. I'm going to be the first in my family to own my own business." "And you won't be the last, my son," Eleanor replied, remembering her own journey. "Now it's time to work hard and, when you can, reach out to those who come after." While these transformations were happening, Sterling Maxwell faced his own retraining process. The mandatory program he was attending was not a mere formality, as he had initially imagined. It was intense, challenging, and above all, transformative. In the third week of the program, during a particularly impactful session, people who had suffered banking discrimination shared their stories. A 70-year-old black woman recounted how she was treated as suspicious when trying to withdraw her own pension. A young man from a low-income neighborhood described the humiliation of having a manager loudly suggest that his paycheck might be forged. A trans woman narrated how employees laughed and exchanged glances while she tried to update her registration data. For the first time, Sterling truly listened. He didn't just hear but felt the weight of those experiences. In a moment of rare vulnerability, his defenses completely crumbled. Silent tears began to stream down his face as he recognized patterns of behavior that, until then, he considered normal or justifiable. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat in his home office and began writing frantically. Page after page, he vented about the pressures of the system, the ingrained prejudices, the institutional blindness that had made him lose sight of the human being behind each number. By dawn, he held a 20-page document, a practical guide to humanized customer service, based on his own mistakes and the lessons painfully learned. Without anyone asking, he sent the material to Patricia Miller with a note. "If it can be useful so that others do not make the same mistakes, feel free to use it." Patricia read the document with growing interest. The raw honesty and practicality of the recommendations impressed her. She called Eleanor. "I need you to see this. It's from Sterling." Days later, the guide Beyond Appearances, Principles for Truly Universal Service was adopted as mandatory training material throughout the Horizon Bank network. The irony was not lost. The man who had been the protagonist of one of the worst examples of discrimination was now the author of the material that would help eradicate it. In her simple house, Eleanor received an unexpected visit that afternoon. Marianne arrived excited, carrying a folder with the Horizon Bank logo. "Mom, you won't believe it. I received an invitation." Eleanor raised her eyebrows, curious. Marianne, with her MBA in social finance and years of experience in impact projects, rarely got so excited about professional proposals. Horizon Bank is creating an entire department dedicated to financial inclusion. They want me to lead the team that will design specific products for historically excluded populations from the banking system. Micro-entrepreneurs, rural communities, low-income seniors. Eleanor smiled, a sense of accomplishment filling her chest. "And you're going to accept?" Marianne hesitated briefly. "At first I was in doubt," After all, it was the bank that treated you so horribly. But then I thought better. If they are truly committed to this change, I can do more good by being inside the system than by criticizing from outside. Besides, she smiled mischievously, someone needs to make sure your voice continues to be heard. Even when you're not in the meetings. Mother and daughter laughed together, complicit as they always had been. Outside, the fine rain falling over Springfield seemed to wash the city, bringing a renewed air. On the horizon, lights began to turn on, points of clarity amidst the twilight, just like the small foci of change that now illuminated an institution once dominated by the darkness of prejudice. Eleanor approached the window, observing the city she had adopted as her own so many decades ago. You know, honey, I always thought my greatest achievement would be to build a business from scratch and give you the life I never had. But now I see that perhaps my purpose was greater. Perhaps I needed to go through all this to be able to open doors for many other people. Marianne hugged her mother from behind, resting her chin on her shoulder. You always open doors, Mum. The difference is that now the world is finally paying attention. 6 months had passed since the day Eleanor walked into that bank branch with an $820,000 check in her purse. The Midlands winter was coming to an end, and spring was beginning to colour Springfield with yellow and purple IPE trees that dotted the urban landscape like natural works of art. Eleanor walked through Liberty Square, her favourite place in the city, enjoying the Saturday morning. She wore the same simple dress and the same fabric purse from that fateful day. On the outside, nothing seemed to have changed. Inside, everything was different. Her cell phone rang. It was Julia, who, in addition to being a humanized customer service supervisor, had now become a dear friend. Ms. Eleanor, just confirming our quarterly board meeting on Monday. We have incredible news to present. I'll be there, Julia. Wouldn't miss it for anything. As she hung up, Eleanor smiled. The Client Advisory Board, which began as a corrective measure after the incident, had transformed into one of the pillars of Horizon Bank's new philosophy. Her suggestions were not only heard, but implemented with seriousness, creating a model that was already beginning to be copied by other financial institutions. Continuing her walk, Eleanor decided to pass by the branch where everything had started. As she approached the location, she noticed something different right at the entrance, a large adhesive seal on the glass door with the words, "Committed to respect and inclusion, we serve everyone with dignity." Inside the branch, the environment had completely changed. The physical space was the same, but the atmosphere was different. Employees greeted clients by name, regardless of their appearance or the value of their accounts. An area with coffee and water was available for everyone. On the walls, photos of local entrepreneurs who had prospered with the bank's support replaced the impersonal posters of financial products. "Can I help you, Mom?" A young teller approached with a genuine smile. "I'm just observing," Eleanor replied. "The changes are remarkable." "We've worked hard for this," the young man said proudly. "Since the implementation of the new Humanized Service Program, our satisfaction surveys have risen from 62% to 89%. And 120 clients who had left the bank decided to return." Eleanor nodded, satisfied. Numbers don't lie. The transformation was not just of appearance, but of essence. As she left the branch, she encountered someone she didn't expect, Sterling Maxwell, the former manager who had torn up her check and now coordinated basic customer service at the community branch. "Miss Eleanor," he greeted her with visible nervousness. "What a coincidence to find you here." "Mr. Maxwell, how are things at Willow Creek Community Bank?" Sterling hesitated before answering, carefully choosing his words. "Different, challenging, transformative. I'm learning a lot." Eleanor observed the man in front of her. He was no longer the arrogant executive of 6 months ago. There was something different in his eyes, a newly acquired humility, perhaps even a spark of genuine empathy. "I heard your work with micro-entrepreneurs has been exemplary," Eleanor commented. Sterling seemed surprised by the compliment. "I've been striving. Yesterday we helped a lady who sells homemade cakes formalize her business and get a small loan for an industrial kitchen. She cried when she signed the papers. She said she never imagined a bank would believe in her." "And how did that make you feel?" "Danke," Like I was finally doing something that really matters. Sterling paused, gathering courage. Miss Eleanor, I know I've said this before, but I need to repeat. Thank you. What happened was terrible, unforgivable, but the way you responded, it changed everything. Not just the bank, but me too. Eleanor observed the man for a few moments. She saw sincerity in his words, but knew that true transformations are proven over time. Mr. Maxwell, as I said before, respect is a right for everyone, not a privilege. Continue your work. The true test of character is what we do when no one is watching. With a discreet nod, Eleanor bid farewell and went on her way. As she walked through the streets of Springfield, she made a detour to visit some of the businesses she had helped boost over the years. Mr. Anthony's bakery, now expanded, had a line at the door. His cheese bread was considered one of the best in the region. The Sullivan Brothers Auto Repair Shop, which started with only 2 bays, now occupied an entire warehouse and employed 15 people from the neighborhood. Ms. Hilda's uniform factory not only served local businesses, but was also beginning to export to other states. Small empires born from the trust of someone who, like them, knew the value of an opportunity. As evening fell, Eleanor passed by the community shelter, where she had volunteered for over 20 years. She helped serve dinner, talked to the homeless people who found refuge there, listened to their stories. For her, that silent work was as important as her business achievements, perhaps even more so. At home, she found Marianne organizing documents. Her daughter glowed in her new position in the bank's financial inclusion department. Mum, I have incredible news for Monday's meeting. The fund has already benefited 37 entrepreneurs, all with payments on time. Zero default! The board decided to double the resources and create a mentorship program where experienced entrepreneurs guide the new beneficiaries. Eleanor smiled, proud. And how are you feeling in this new job? Marianne sighed, satisfied. Like I'm exactly where I should be. We are creating specific financial products for audiences that have always been invisible to the traditional banking system. Yesterday, a lady hugged me crying because we managed to approve a loan for her house renovation. You know what she said? For the first time in my life, I felt respected inside a bank. Eleanor's eyes welled up. This was it. This was exactly why it was all worth it. On Monday, the advisory board meeting room was packed. The 12 members, clients of different profiles, frontline employees, and financial inclusion specialists, animatedly discussed the results of recent months. Jonathan Vance, the bank's president, proudly presented the numbers: increased customer satisfaction, return of closed accounts, reduction of complaints, growth in the microcredit segment. And the most surprising thing, he concluded, looking directly at Eleanor, is that our profitability has not fallen as some feared. On the contrary. By becoming more human, more accessible, we attracted an audience that previously didn't even consider entering our branches. It's a market expansion based on values, not empty marketing. Patricia Miller then spoke. I have a proposal for the board. Given the success of the microcredit fund, we suggest not only doubling its resources, but also expanding its reach. We want to take the model to other cities in the Midlands, starting with the most disadvantaged regions. The board approved the proposal unanimously. Eleanor, observing that room full of people genuinely committed to transformation, felt a profound sense of accomplishment. It wasn't just about a torn check or a humiliation avenged. It was about systemic change, about opening doors that would remain open long after she was no longer there. At the end of the meeting, as everyone was leaving, Jonathan approached Eleanor with an envelope in his hands. Ms. Smith, this is for you. A new check, for the exact value of the one that was destroyed. With corrected interest, of course. Eleanor accepted the envelope, but her gaze conveyed a clear message. It wasn't for the money that she had done all this. Thank you, Mr. Vance, but know that the true value of what we achieved cannot be measured in dollars. The following Saturday, Eleanor returned to the same street as the branch, in the same clothes and with the same fabric purse. On the outside, nothing had changed. On the inside, everything. The branch was now a bridge to dreams, and the service mirrored the principle that had always moved her, to treat everyone with dignity. As she left, she observed the neighborhood where she had raised her daughter and built her life. She reaffirmed to herself that true value lies not in appearance, but in character, persistence, and the legacy built for others. On her way home, she passed a public garden where children were playing freely. She sat on a bench and watched the scene with a serene smile. A girl of approximately 6 approached, curious. "What are you doing, ma'am?" "Watching the world change, my dear. A little bit at a time." The girl smiled, not fully comprehending, and returned to her games. Eleanor remained there, bathed in the golden light of the Midlands late afternoon, reflecting on how small actions can trigger great transformations. That night, before sleeping, she wrote in her diary, "When power and empathy meet, institutions change, people change, and no one needs to be measured by the clothes they wear anymore." And so, in a city where cheese bread is sacred and mountains embrace the horizon, a discreet woman transformed pain into change and humiliation into legacy, proving that respect still makes and always will make all the difference.